So when it comes time to sell your practice, probably the worst thing that you can do is make a instantaneous or last-minute decision to enter the marketplace. In a perfect world, you would start thinking about this 2 to 3 years in advance, and there's a number of things you can do to best position your practice for successful sale. Now, there's certain things we can't change, like geography. Your practice is located in a particular zip code, and you're not going to be able to change that. But there are things that you can do to influence your practice sale, and the success and timing of that plays a key role. One of the first things to consider is modernization. That's one of the first tips I tell practices. Take a look at your practice. Look at your equipment. How old is some of your equipment? I'm not saying that you need to go out and replace everything all brand new, but if you're using computer systems, if you're using radiology technology or ultrasound technology that's a decade old, it might be time to upgrade that, and upgrade it when you can spread out the expense over a few years and also gain some of the profit and return of that investment prior to selling your practice. Modernization of records is important. Most of our younger buyers are expecting paperless practices, where all your records are paperless. At the very least, you want to make sure that your software that you're using is the most updated version available, and that you're actively able to produce the various reports that a buyer or buyer's consultant or advisor is going to request from you. So those are all things that I would want to modernize in the practice. And something that has become really important in the last couple years because of some changes with employment and seeing clients is the ability to communicate effectively with your client base. In the past, it was a matter of somebody walking in the front door and visiting with them face to face. But in addition to some restrictions of people moving around and doing things, recently, it's also a change in how people are communicating. It is very common for somebody to want to make an online appointment or expect that you be able to respond back to them or be able to buy a product or fill a prescription online. So don't forget to modernize your communications. This means the ability for your client to communicate with you in manners other than the telephone and the in person, so that you're able to do it in other manners. So kind of capping this off, when you're looking at getting ready to sell your practice, the first thing I would come through my mind is, are they going to look at my practice like it's, their grandfather's practice? Is it out of date? Is the equipment out of date? Is it old? Can they communicate effectively? Those are things to start with, and because those often require a significant capital expense, that's why I would say look at modernization first as your first tip, and do it 2 to 3 years before you sell your practice. Another thing to focus on in getting your practice ready for sale is the facility where you're working. What does it look like? What condition is it in? Can it handle expansion? Let's look at through some of each of those aspects. First of all, growth. If you are limited by number of exam rooms, size of a treatment room, any of those kinds of things that you're making work or you're getting by or it's quote unquote functional, that could be a limiting factor when somebody else looks at your practice. If there's room to do an expansion or a remodel and you know that it is necessary, don't do it for the sake of doing it. But if you know it's necessary and you should have done it already, now might be the time to do some of that. Okay. Condition is another thing that we run into. A lot of people like to call it deferred maintenance, which is, I really don't want to spend the money, so I'm not going to fix it today. Now's the time to quit doing that. If you've got paint peeling on the sunny side of the building, if you've got a gutter that's loose and wobbles in the wind, if you've got door trim that's been chewed up by a dog and needs paint, now's the time to correct those things, because that moves us to the third point, which is aesthetics. And you only have one shot to make a first impression with a buyer as well as a client. When that buyer comes in and looks at your practice, you might be in a great community, you may be well-liked, great reputation, you may practice excellent medicine. But if your facility has too many warts on it, that's going to give a bad impression to that buyer. And we shouldn't be judging a practice strictly based on facility, but we're human. And we might go into a restaurant that has exceptionally good food, but it's dirty, cluttered, and uncomfortable. We don't hold as high opinion of that restaurant. So do a little cleaning, a little bit of repair, and make sure that your practice is capable of handling the caseload into the next decade after you sell it. You probably aren't going to be equipped to do this yourself. You'll need help from a marketing expert, but is to determine whether you actually have a brand. Now, brand is a lot different than marketing or advertising. Brand is identification. It separates you from your competitors in the marketplace. And this is a long process of establishing an identity through smart marketing, smart advertising, and a clear definition of exactly who you are, and what you stand for. Again, it might take a marketing professional to help you do that, but I have noticed that practices that actually have a presence in the community that's very identifiable and distinguished from the also other practices, quote unquote, tend to sell better. People like the idea of buying a practice that stands out with a reputation in the community, and that's often very much reinforced by a brand image. This fourth point is the one that most people focus on, and it certainly is probably the most important, at least as it comes to addressing dollars that will eventually be in your pocket, and it's the profitability of your practice. Now, there's a number of things that you need to do to get your practice in an optimized position financially. First thing I want you to do is clean up your financials. All business owners have written off expenses, some of them quasi-personal. Maybe a government authority wouldn't be exactly excited that you're paying for a cell phone through your practice. Everybody does those kind of things, I understand that. But the last couple years before you sell your practice, you need to make sure that all of your personal expenses are no longer showing up on your financial reports. Let me give you a specific, simple math reason. If I was going to pay 30% effective tax rate on $1, if I was able to write that expense off, I would save 30 cents in taxes, right? I write off $1, I save 30 cents in taxes. Now, if you ask a veterinary appraiser what is $1 worth in the valuation of the practice, they're typically going to tell you it's around $4 to $6. So you have two choices at this point. Keep writing things off that are personal expenses in your practice and save 30 cents on every dollar, or don't do that, go ahead and lose the 30 cents in taxes, but get $5 to $6 more in practice value. I think the trade-off is well worth it. The other thing that you want to do is look at your fees. You might be adjusting your fees once a year, maybe not even that frequently. Now's the time to consider updating your fees and making sure that you're current, because you only now have maybe 2-3 years left of ownership. So it's not like you've got another 10 years to collect revenue out of the practice. You've only got a couple years left. So make sure you're maximizing that opportunity. The next thing is to look at the expense side of the equation. So how is your practice doing compared to other practices? Do you know what the labor benchmark is? Do you know that your support staff in a small animal practice shouldn't generally consume more than 18 to 20% of your revenue? If it's higher, now's the time to fix that. So talk to your business consultant, talk to your veterinary appraiser, and start making a plan to address key performance indicators and benchmarks. And finally, look at optimizing performance, not maximizing profit. You could try to reduce expenses so much to hold on as much profit as you can and actually hurt the practice by not reinvesting, not marketing, not keeping your labor costs competitive or your pay rates competitive, losing key staff members over that. So don't over penny pinch, but just be budget-minded for the next 24 to 36 months before you hit the market. Finally, the fifth point, and that is market timing. And I don't mean timing the market like you hear people talk about buying stocks at the perfect day of a rise in stock prices. I'm talking about bringing your practice to the market at the right time, when your practice is ready, when your practice is optimized. What do I mean by that? Your revenues are growing, not shrinking. Your earnings or profit is also increasing as your revenue is increasing. That you're doing everything to build your clientele, so you're getting new clients. You're adding maybe new services. Your growth and expansion is good. And the hardest thing probably for anybody to do is sell a practice when you're hitting on all cylinders. But you now have to stop for a moment, walk over the other side of the room and put your feet in the buyer's shoes. What practice do you want to buy? One that's stagnant? One that's shrinking? One that's just doing about the same thing, or one that's exploding and growing and going places and it's exciting and the staff's excited and the community's doing well? That is the most difficult time to sell something that you're very proud of. but that's when everybody else wants it. Now, again, it's not possible to guarantee the sale of your practice or the swift sale of your practice. But those that have followed these 5 points are typically going to have better performance and better luck in the marketplace, attracting more than one qualified buyer, achieving the highest and best sale price, and doing it in a timely manner. Those 5 tips should improve the chances you'll sell your practice successfully.